Seems like ever since the first day we met, there is no one else I think of more than you. Can't seem to forget, can't get you on my head. There's no verdict's in, I'm crazy over you. How can one be down? Tell me where to start, 'cause every time you smile, I feel tremors in my heart. I have a one concern, I cannot get with you till my day comes. Here's what I'm gonna do. You sitting up in my room, thinking about you. I must confess, I'm a mess for you.
Kavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. That's what they're saying out there. They're standing in a circle in the rotunda saying that over and over again. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. You matter. You matter. And I am fighting for you. And I will not stop. I will not stop today. I will not stop tomorrow. You are loved. You matter. You belong here.
You are welcome here. You are loved here.
Bless your heart.
You are part of our family. The table's prepared and you know that we care. Come on, you are welcome. Come on, you are loved. Come on, you are welcome. Trans people, we love you. Oh my God. Nebraska Senator, ladies and gentlemen, Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, spent her time on the floor speaking in protest of what the Nebraska Senate was considering, the whole idea of outlawing trans surgery. Trans surgery, which didn't actually exist until 2006. There's a man who is fighting against this and has done a wonderful job leading people around the world in that. I have the great pleasure of having him interrupt my family life by making me take my wife out to dinner every weekend because of all of the sins I've committed against her. He is none other than my very good friend, Jon Uhler. Jon Uhler happens to be a devout man of God. He also happens to be one of the peer leaders in terms of psychological theory and practicum when it comes to sexual deviancy in the prison system. There is no one in the world who is equal to him in that regard, and I want to introduce you all to my very good friend. Jon, do you love trans people?
Yeah, I'm. What do you say? Right?
These people are rabid. They are absolutely rabid.
Okay.
And it's crazy rabid.
And Ken, isn't it interesting? That's the most you could say. This little mantra. That's it. I mean, really. If I have a simple question for her, define a trans person.
Yeah.
It's a manufactured term.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm getting a little older these days. Still feel young, but I guess I've reached a point, meaning in terms of duration of doing therapy, that I guess I have some perspective now, and that's why I can tell people.
Quick, does she need therapy? Just.
She is a classic. What we saw in terms of display, and Ken, my apologies. Who literally, because I came in late. Who was she?
She's a Nebraska senator, state senator, and she was fighting against the transgendered surgery for children.
Okay. What we heard was a classic. You're either, that's a classic cult member. Right? They do mantras. That's all they do. Because there's no intellectual, there's no critical analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all they've got. Why? Because it's a house of cards. Why? Because it doesn't exist. Now, everybody, what do you mean it doesn't exist? Slow down. What I tell people, slow down. And then I also add, it's not real. And then they go, oh, okay, it's real in the sense that we're having to contend with this thing. Mm-hmm. But what I challenge anybody is to find this term, find this phenomenon prior to the year 2005. Mm-hmm. And you won't. Zero de nada. It's not in any in year 2005 or going backward in time. You will never find this concept or term in any college textbook, a graduate level textbook. It's not in any of the theories. It wasn't taught in medical school. So I went to graduate school for counseling, including Cal State Fullerton. They had a dual track, as it were, school counseling, right? Then school counselors, now the whole field has gone nuts. Okay, they actually advocate for this crap, or marriage and family counseling. Okay, so my master's is in counseling, emphasis marriage and family. Mm-hmm. Okay, Cal State Fullerton is pretty renowned, especially for group therapy. Gerald Corey, who is the guru in group therapy, he was teaching. I had him as a professor. I had Sonstegard. He was a third generation Adlerian, and that's where school counseling came from. Adler is the basis, Adlerian psychology is the basis of all school counseling. So it was and James Bitter is an Adlerian. So we had very renowned individuals, zero reference to trans. None of and again, I worked with many populations, but I was very steeped in working with kids in the system. If ever you're going to find what is true about youth culture, you work with, and this was the population I worked with, was severely emotionally disturbed. Those are the kids in the trans movement. Those are the kids that are being exploited by this ruse. So we either have, prior to 2005, that all professionals, all medical professionals, psychiatrists, clinical professionals, all the great theorists, all the way back to Freud, and my colleagues, we were either brain dead to miss such a major thing, or this is not true. This is the greatest scam, scheme, and ruse that's ever been foisted upon vulnerable youth and their families. It is man-made, and it's now had 20 years to take hold. So now if you talk to the average person, they will reference the term trans, like this brain-dead senator. You ask someone, tell me what trans is. Well, oh, it's someone that's not comfortable in what teenager is comfortable in their own body? Well, but they don't. That bottom line. Okay, that's the angst of adolescence. Well, but they don't identify with social norms. Okay, we used to call them tomboys.
Exactly.
Well, but they're more effeminate. Okay, they're effeminate. Boy. I'll tell you how to solve this issue. Stop focusing on kids' sex and sexuality and get pornography's influence out of that. And this thing will dry up and blow away. And you get rid of the change in diagnostic criterion with the DSM-5. This thing, the entire trans scam, became profitable in 2013. And I've challenged Blanchard and Zucker to do the right thing, step up. They were part of what I call the Dirty Dozen Plus One. They changed the wording of the diagnosis to, now we have gender dysphoria and then gender identity disorder. Okay. With the change that was made, it allowed this to be billable. And ever since then, you look at any chart anywhere around the world, as far as referral rates, it's flatlined basically, and then it shoots straight up. It's like a tidal wave. You don't have Dr. Michelle Cretella called it a J curve. Okay, that is not a trend. That only happens with pandemics, and that only happens with target marketing, brilliant marketing. This thing is a scheme that has multi-level very dark special interests, and they're all feeding off the carcasses of these kids. And the trans movement, in essence, is this, and this will speak to this mantra of this senator, okay, where the trans movement essentially is this. You're taking troubled kids, you are manipulating them emotionally to believe there's no such thing as biology 101. So there goes reality testing out the window. That's exactly what a cult does. We used to joke, there was that term, well, it's as basic as biology 101. What do we mean by that? Male and female. If you can get every perpetrator, cult leader, manipulator, sociopath, psychopath, they all understand this because they have no conscience. So there's only one thing left to prevent them from crossing your boundaries, anybody's boundaries, because they're not going to stop themselves. There's only one thing, which is the other person's a target of opportunities. the intended target, their intuition. So every manipulator has to go after the other person's intuition. And because intuition is that mechanism that allows me to know what's going on prior to having enough information in front of my face.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to wait until there's enough information and facts and details piled up, the snake oil salesman has gotten out of Dodge.
Mm-hmm.
So the trans movement takes and appeals to 4 categories of people, by the way, or populations of troubled young kids. Okay, we have sexual abuse survivors, a very significant percentage. I saw a study that says about 85%. I was going to put it out at about 80. Okay, so these are kids that have already had their sexual boundaries crossed. You have the kids on the spectrum disorder, okay, autism spectrum. What do those two populations have in common, those two groups? Sexual abuse survivors, or those that have been exploited sexually or manipulated, and autism spectrum, both have a hard time with their intuition. And then you have those that are being sexually exploited, or social contagion, those on social media, those that are being influenced. And then you have those that are currently being groomed. Now, as far as getting back to the predator or the perpetrator, what they're going to do is they're going to work somebody's intuition. We call that grooming. And the perpetrator will essentially send this message in a couple different ways. They'll say this, because the other person, the target that they're working, the young person that they're going to groom, it doesn't have to just be young people. Their intuition starting, their little eyebrows that go, hey, okay, they're starting to catch on that something's not right. So the manipulator will give the message to the person that they're going to work, they're going to manipulate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know what it looks like, but it's really not that.
Wow.
Okay. That can come in a lot of different forms. Like, would I do that? I can't believe you're doubting me, right? So what the manipulator is doing is they're getting the other person incrementally to turn the dial down on their intuition, to turn the radar system down. The perpetrator knows, the cult leader knows, the manipulator, sociopath, psychopath. They know when it's mission accomplished, when the victim picks up where the perpetrator left off. So when the victim now turns to somebody else who says, hey, Tom, I'm not sure about him. It sure seems like you've been changing since you've been around him, or looks like he's moved in and he's helping himself to your bank account, or It's when the victim turns to their friend or an outside source or whoever is saying, this doesn't look equitable. This doesn't look right. When the victim turns to that outside person, that third person says, well, I know what it looks like, but it's really not that. He's really a good guy.
Wow.
They're done. They're in the cult. They drank the Kool-Aid. And we get that term from Jonestown, a cult.
Mm-hmm.
The trans movement can be summarized this way, and this is what people really need to understand. And you showed the graphic, and I appreciate the fact that you've done that, because this is why we have that site called unmaskingthetransmovement.com, because that's exactly what we're doing. People can go on that site, and you notice there are episodes. We're up to about 51, give or take, and both have 2 parts. So we've got about 100 30-minute segments. We have experts. And what I invite anybody to do, if you want to learn about how this is a grand scheme, how can I say that? And including all the facets of this, go onto that site, spend time. You're going to see interviews with experts such as Dr. Michelle Cretella, the past president of the American College of Pediatrics, Dr. Von Mall, He was a flight surgeon, but he's an expert as far as understanding how the body works and the endocrine system. We just have many, many experts. As a matter of fact, we recently did one on how pedophiles are using the trans movement to ultimately get pedophilia decriminalized and legalized. So there's a lot of concerns. We also have one with Pierre Barnes looking at the books that are sexualizing kids. So I really encourage people to go on, spend time. So there's, all told, we've got about 50 hours worth of material on there. We have one on furries, the guy that wrote the book on it. So he does a deep dive into that. So it's a tremendous resource, and we're just getting going. If anybody wants to donate, by the way, because myself and my producer, announcer Brad, we've done this for free. Yeah. So I do encourage you, because I actually want to get him paid or, compensate somehow. But we're doing this because we care. His daughter almost got sucked into this. So everybody that's a part of this has a heart to protect kids. And that's what the issue is. That woman that was running her mouth saying, trans kids matter and all that, she doesn't realize what a fool, meaning a useful idiot. I'm not calling her names.
No.
Okay, what a useful idiot she is, because she doesn't understand what the trans movement is. Okay, what the trans movement is this, and it really is summarized in this way. It is a moving sidewalk. You have to picture it that way. If a young person who is troubled gets into this entire world, and there's very methodical steps. The first thing they will do is start to use the lingo. This is just like every cult does. So if any of you are listening, if you're a parent, you need to worry if your child starts using this issue of pronouns. If they start referencing non-binary, they're already being groomed. Okay, they're starting to drink the Kool-Aid. They're using the language. They think it's normal. There is nothing more basic than biology 101. If you tell someone that there are more than two sexes, meaning that's what they mean by binary, male, female. If you say non-binary, you are now introducing a delusion. Okay. And eventually what's so insidious about this is, and what we saw on display, that little mantra rant, and she started to ramp up the longer she went.
Exactly. That was a chant.
There you go. And
wow.
And that shows you this thing is based in emotion. And so she gave evidence of what's inside of her. She's so angry because she's either drunk the Kool-Aid, or I'd be interested to check her internet.
That she may be along the lines of someone who's grooming someone.
Okay. Or in one way or another benefiting from this whole thing.
Exactly. I got to ask you here, because a lot of individuals, we got a great honor talking tonight with my very good friend, Jon Uhler here. Jon Uhler, who does a wonderful program every Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time here called Journey to Healing. If you want to repair your relationships, family, friends, and otherwise, work relationships accordingly, this is the man you want to listen to. Jon, there are those who perpetuate the whole idea that gay rights, lesbian rights, transgendered rights, pedophile rights, all of these particular deviancy rights are akin to women's rights, akin to civil rights. And if you could tell everybody why they have to do that in this particular process of getting it into our verbiage, our system of thought and reasonable application of law.
That's right. They have to do it because they have to confuse the issue. Again, that's part of that manipulation. Civil rights, the issue of race is objective. Skin color is objective. Okay. Sex or gender, but we need to go back to the old thing, male or female.
Yep.
That's objective. None of that can change. Okay. So if you discriminate against someone because you can't see past their race, creed, color, gender, or sex, then you have a real issue. So it's looking at a group of people that have been oppressed. That's what they're playing upon. So the one thing about, I'll just use the term, the one thing about psychopaths, there's two kinds, bloody psychopath and white collar psychopath. But the thing about a psychopath is they have no conscience. So by the time somebody becomes one, they're very adept at strategy. So we'll just say an adept manipulator is they know how to work people based upon their emotions. And they're very bold. I call it the big lie theory. Bill Clinton was great at that. Okay, and that's neither Republican or Democrat. The reality is he's a classic white collar psychopath. James Fallon labeled him such. I had concluded that before James Fallon, but he's written and I haven't. Okay,
Barack Obama would be in that category.
Absolutely. Well, and how many politicians on the right? Okay. I got, I'd love to debate with Paul Ryan. I got some questions for him. So it's, by degree, we've got psychopaths all over the place. And, but I think there's more in the Democrat Party. So long story short, they have no problem because they have no shame. Why do they have no shame? They have no conscience. And they use our conscience against us. Why? Because it's effective. But they once had a conscience. So the thing about perpetrators and predators is they know us better than we know them. And they know that normal people want to give other people the benefit of the doubt. So they use that against us. And so we don't question enough. We're not discerning. So what they'll also do, one very effective technique is they come out of the gate with a big whopper. And they know the average person would never lie in a big way, because how can you live with yourself? We'd be bothered by that. Exactly. So they will craft statements, arguments that are just fabrication. They're just huge lies. And they say it in such a way that they sound very emphatic. And then if you question them, then they go into, the drama mode, which also puts people back on their heels, such as, I can't believe, right? And so before you know, we're second guessing ourselves. So with each of these special interests, as it were, they have used that. Now there's a difference. I will say this. The gay rights movement allowed for the Trojan horse of the pedophiles. And so there are people in the gay community that are not pedophiles. And it's important for us to know that. Now, do they have issues? Of course they have issues, especially the males. Are they into deviance? Of course. But you don't have, especially with the males, you don't have any males that are into the gay lifestyle without progressively deviant pornography. It's just reality. A lot of women that are lesbians are reactive, I think, to sexual abuse. Now, both are wrong, according to scripture. Both are, the woman at the well, for instance, when Jesus talked to the woman at the well, she was living in sin, but he dealt with her very differently than the woman caught in adultery. The woman caught in adultery, meaning she was a small businesswoman ruining marriages. He spared her life, but he told her, go and sin no more. He didn't say anything to the woman at the well. All that to say, we need discernment to try to figure out why are they doing what they're doing, but they're still in a condition of sin. So we need to deal with that. And that ultimately, that's rebellion. but there may be a reason why. But for the men, a little bit different between male homosexuals and female. So for the men, it's very much tied to deviance. For instance, when you think of a gay bathhouse, which sex or gender
Male.
comes to mind? Right, it's men. You don't have female bathhouses. That should show us by nature something different. But the pedophiles were riding the coattails of the women's movement. Or, I'm sorry, the gay rights movement rode the coattails of the women's movement, and then the pedophiles were just behind that. And now there are really significant forces, and I encourage people to go to unmaskingthetransmovement.com and listen to Aaron Holmes that did a deep dive into the Prostasia Foundation. That is a cover for pedophiles. James Canner, we talked about him. He's the leading intellectual who's pushing for this. So they are very serious. You can see what's going on in California. They lower the age down to 14, that a 14 or 15-year-old, they say, can have sex with a 24-year-old or 25-year-old. Okay, right? And Scott Wiener, pardon the pun, out of San Francisco, he's Nancy Pelosi's good friend, was the one to lead all this. He's also the one that forced deviant men into women's prisons.
And also, the FBI and the Texas Child and Family Services Administration admitted that 6-year-olds are okay with consensual sex.
Yeah, so it's Kinsey. This goes back to Kinsey.
Yeah, and I'm going to have you come back and talk in greater detail about this particular thing, because it is in such an enrichment to people who listen. But John, I want you to hit on something before we go to break. You mentioned emotionalism. You mentioned scripture. The church. Why is that the breeding ground for the LGBTQRSTUVWXYZ and the P community? Why is that the source of their greatest strength right now?
There you go. And Ken, let me interject. I didn't finish the moving sidewalk.
Yeah.
Right. The next step is social transitioning, and then they're going to begin to medicalize kids. The medicalization of kids will sterilize them. Meaning, if your kid gets involved in this is the trans movement. So social transitioning, medicalization, that means sterilization, and then amputation of body parts, because that moving sidewalk dumps them out on a surgeon's gurney. That's the trans movement. So when she was running her mouth, doing that mantra, what she's fighting for is the right for kids to be manipulated onto that sidewalk to get body parts chopped off, their sex organs chopped off. Oh, she loves trans kids, does she? No. She's so stinking ignorant, if not deceptive, that she's running her mouth fighting for the right for kids to be manipulated. She has a low bar approach for child protection. Now, as far as the church unfortunately has drunk the Kool-Aid of, and I think it's a doctrine of demons myself.
Yeah,
we hear that term. That bottom line, Christians should be nice. You won't find that in the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5. You won't find that in 1 Corinthians 13. Okay. I think because of Bill Hybels and Willow Creek and then Saddleback, the church growth movement, where you had charlatans that introduced the business growth models into the church. And that's when we started to have the mega churches. I have nothing against large churches. But if it's based upon pandering to people in order to draw numbers, now you have invited wolves into the flock. And so discernment has been dumbed down. And predators, the number one place that a sexual predator, a sophisticated one, loves to go is to church. That's their number one preference. I'm more concerned about churches than I am the trans movement. Now, as you say, why are they targeting? Because churches, in a way, because it's so much fun, right? Think about psychopaths, sexual psychopaths. They can mar and scar the souls of children, they get a high off of that. But because they are so anti-God, now they would say they're not. They don't believe in the God of the Bible, right? That scripture says we protect children. They want to exploit children, and Satan is after the lambs. And so they are targeting churches because churches become useful idiots because we don't have discernment, because that would force us to realize what's in front of our face and to have difficult conversations. You can even see that with the gospel message. The gospel message is like this big tent theory on the front end, come one, come all. And then we're left to wonder, well, why did so many people fall away? Or why do they seem to have so much issue with their continuing life of sin? Because you invited a bunch of non-Christians into the church. The church itself is not for evangelism. It's for the teaching and training of Christians to go out to do evangelism. Now, if a non-Christian comes in, it would be wonderful if they get saved. But the church itself, meaning when we meet on Sundays, that's not for evangelism. That is for Christians. If you invite a bunch of non-Christians, they won't, generally speaking, they won't like it, right? Because you're hearing a message of standards. You're hearing a message of how God views things. Hopefully they'll hear a message of forgiveness. And that's not to say we shouldn't invite non-Christians. Of course we should invite. Yeah. But if you open the doors to anybody and then think, well, and here's part of what happened with the church growth movement, we'll get non-Christians in and we'll get them involved and then they'll feel the love. As a matter of fact, we'll have Starbucks at church and then they can be casual, they'll feel comfortable. And so we'll love them into the kingdom. No, you can't love anybody into the kingdom, right? Only God, it's a miracle. How somebody gets in the kingdom is God performs a resurrection of our spirit. We are dead. We can't contribute to that. We need, from the outside in, our heart of stone to be made into a heart of flesh, a soft, receptive heart. We can't do that. And that's why we don't have to pander to, we don't have to play soft music. We don't have to have somebody walk an aisle. I'm not against any, right? But we don't have to use human methods to do God's work.
Exactly.
God's Spirit using his word will do that. And so we have this open door policy. And now we can't discern, and before you know it, you're embracing everything because we want to make sure everybody's happy.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the world deceives us to enter it. We're trying to deceive the world to enter the kingdom. We're trying to lull them into the kingdom of God, and that's not what God would have us to do. It's a change of heart, a change of mindset. Before you come into the kingdom of God. Listen, we got to take a quick break, and I'm glad that you spoke on that particular subject matter regarding the church, because there is a ravenous wolf that we're going to speak about when we come back, who has literally taken the fold by storm. And now he's getting into trouble because he likes to wear women's clothing. Talk about Sam Brinton when we come back. We're talking tonight with Jon Uhler. Jon Uhler organization, Unmasking the Trans Movement, is something that you all need to be a part of. If you have a child in school, I have a grandchild who's in school, I need to be a part of the Unmasking the Trans Movement. And this movement is, like and unto what Jon has said, is a foray into deception and manipulation and destruction of your children. You've got to get here and you've got to become a joint member. We will be right back with more of the best. After this, I have to ask you two very important questions at this particular juncture. Number one, do you know where your children are? The second question is almost more important. Do your children know where you are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
I'm Paul Stanley of KISS. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
I'm Councilman Eric Joya. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
Help make a safer, stronger DC. Whether it's a missing person, an unsolved homicide, or keeping citizens safe, there are a number of cases that are still unsolved. Please take a moment to listen to this one.
On Wednesday, May 27, 2015, at approximately 9:40 p.m., 27-year-old D.C. resident Sharnice Milton was shot and killed in the 2700 block of Good Hope Road Southeast. The victim, a journalist for Capital Community News, was changing buses on her way home from covering a meeting. Police believe someone on a dirt bike fired at Ms. Milton, but that she was not the intended target. The Metropolitan Police Department currently offers a reward of up to $25,000 to anyone that provides information which leads to the arrest and conviction of the person or persons wanted for any homicide in the District of Columbia.
If you have information about this case, contact the Metropolitan Police Department, 202-727-9099, and an anonymous text number, 50411.
Before and in just 6 hours, loved ones will gather to remember the life of Anaya Allen. She was shot and killed 2 years ago while sitting in the back of her family's car.
That's right. Police say the 6-year-old was caught in the crossfire of gang violence, and to this day, her murder remains unsolved. Eva is joining us live with what her family is sharing with us this morning. Hey, Eva.
Good morning, Alicia. It has been a long 2 year for Anaya's family, and there's still far from answers. But here is what we know so far. Police have told them they believe Anaya was hit by a stray bullet in the middle of gang violence. The case is open and active. Anaya was eating McDonald's Happy Meal when she was shot, and court documents have linked a 9mm gun to the crime, but police haven't made any arrests. Anaya's grandfather, peace activist KG Wilson, says the family is heartbroken and frustrated.
Not having no justice, and the community saying we don't know nothing, we didn't see anything, because we're not snitches. Nobody sees nothing, nobody knows nothing, nobody heard nothing, even, sadly, if it's a small, innocent child.
They will be celebrating her life at noon today at the 2-year Angelversary event. It takes place at the corner of 36th and Penn Avenue in North Minneapolis, and the community is encouraged to attend. Back to you.
All right, Eva, thanks for that update.
In my happiness, all it takes is just one simple call from you. Turn my heart around if I'm making ground. Pretty baby, please tell me if I'm letting you. Tell me what
airline passengers can breathe easy because the man behind the most infamous airline heist since D.B. Cooper has been brought to justice. That's right. Sticky Sammy is in handcuffs again. And no, it's not the fuzzy kind. Biden's non-binary former nuke guru and convicted bag snatcher was arrested last night at his Maryland home and charged with grand larceny. Police picked him up for being a, quote, fugitive from justice. So wait, does that make him a gender outlaw? We'll have to see what box he checks. Sticky appeared before a judge today who refused to release him, instead extraditing him to Virginia. The investigation is being led by Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, which means this is about what went down at Reagan National in D.C., remember? That's right. Sticky stole an African fashion designer's bag, and then he wore her clothes over and over and over again. So we reached out to the fashion designer, and she said the police have been in contact with her lawyer. And she's been asked to come and identify the items taken by the cops, so it certainly looks like Sticky Sammy robbed this lady. And Sticky was already on a suspended 180-day jail sentence from his Las Vegas baggage thefts. Is this a violation of Sticky's parole? Might be. If so, he could go away for quite a long time.
Quite a long time indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second hour of the Exceptional Conservative Show live for the nation's capital. Listen, we are not ashamed at all of the good news of conservatism, for it is the power of liberation, first to the Republican and then to the tyrant. I have with me tonight a very great friend of mine who is on the battlefield to save your children, a battlefield that he welcomes you to be a part of, unmasking the trans movement. One of our biggest stars of this particular movement, and we only have about 5 minutes left, so I want to try to get you in, and we're going to get you back here as quickly as we possibly can. John, give us your thoughts on Sam Brinton, and why should we be concerned about him wearing women's attire? I mean, he chose some very good stuff to wear too, and you know.
That's right. And you notice they didn't find the underwear. Okay, that's why we should be concerned. But people need to understand, I've been doing sex offender treatment, all told, or working with the full range of sex offenders for 14 years. 11 plus in prison, and then now a private provider on the street, so to speak. What people need to understand is, by the time a man thinks it's a reasonable thing to wear women's underwear and drag, behind the scenes, he is deviant, which means he has saturated himself in hundreds, likely thousands of hours of progressive pornography. And therefore, he has changed his brain, and he is somewhere on the continuum. He certainly entered into deviance. He's somewhere on the continuum of psychopathy, or he's going to start. And so as we look at a guy doing that, because if you think about most guys that are into that, all of that applies as far as the deviance. But what's it take? I mean, the average sex offender in my groups would never think about doing that. They don't have the chutzpah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a very, whether Sam Brinton or not, the guys that are doing this are in a very advanced stage of sexual deviance where they have developed a brazenness about them. So they are so comfortable with putting it out there. Therefore, my contention is they've moved into the realm of psychopathy, which means they have no shame, but even more than that, they have the fun for a predator. Now, how can I call Sam Brinton a predator? He's already a predator because he's been preying upon women and stealing their underwear by targeting luggage. He's never returned any of the women's underwear. He's been masturbating in that underwear.
But John, listen, we live in a society that's woke, we live in a time period where all people can go through stuff. We all sin and fall short of the glory of God, but there's healing, right? Someone of that particular magnitude of deception and deviance, he can be healed overnight, right?
What does Paul say in Romans 1? What does the term given over mean? Given over is a judicial term. The judge hands the prisoner over to the bailiff, over to the officer, to be taken away. So that means there's a point beyond which the person will never come back. So there's a point of no return. Now, we all get up in arms over that because we have poor theology. We need to let Scripture define this. Jeremiah was told to stop praying for certain people, for the Jews, quite frankly. Why? Because they'd crossed the point of no return. Now, can God save anyone? Yeah. Does God have a point beyond which he lets someone go? Absolutely. And we're not just talking the prodigal son. If someone goes too far, they become an object of God's targeted justice for destruction. And when a man reaches a point, and by the way, the point of no return, the reason why they'll never come back, you look at the brain of a psychopath and it becomes different. It is God's judgment. It changes to where they lose conscience and then it disappears. So they have no conscience. You tell me how they're ever going to come back. Therefore, they have no empathy. And I'm sorry?
Quick question for you. There are those out there that will say, if God won't save them, then I will. What's the problem with that?
You believe you have more compassion than God, and you don't have the heart of God because God cares about the victims. Sam Brinton advocated for Rent Boy magazine, Rent Boy website. Rent Boy is a reference to young kids in Amsterdam that are being prostituted. Sam Brinton wrote a piece defending the prostitution of young boys. What did Jesus say about anybody that was going to harm a child like that? So I know how Jesus feels about it. How do you feel about it? Where should your sympathies lie? You have misplaced sympathies. So do you believe you have more compassion than God? That simply means this: you don't understand the trauma that is perpetrated by predators. And Sam Brinton is a predator. And you need to get God's heart of a shepherd. He is protective.
That staff had a point at the end.
Absolutely. There you go.
Listen, John, you know I got to get you back here because things are beginning to brew, not only in Nashville, but also in Nebraska. I would never think Nebraska. But apparently there are over 250 places in the country now where children, including Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C., where children can go and get transgender surgery. How many places were there back in 2005? What was it, 150? And he stepped away. Well, listen, we'll be right back. That's that beautiful young woman right there is coming up in this particular hour. She is none other than Janice Hall, the J Hall World Report. We will be right back with more of the best right after this. That was a great conversation. I'm going to have to bring it back to answer that question. You all have to do the research on that one, but I'll give you the easy answer. There were zero trans surgery centers for children in America in 2005. It's about the money, not about the care. Join the Unmasking the Trans Movement. We will be right back right after these messages.
Seems like